Hello, fellow writers! So, it's been a while since I last spoke to you, and that's because I've been pretty busy working on revising my manuscript. The last time I talked, or the last video I posted on YouTube, was all about going on submission, which is the last step in the process before you sell your novel. Today I want to talk about the first major step after you sell your novel and sign the contract, which is revising to an edit letter. So my editor at Macmillan sent me her letter back in June of this year, and she gave me a period of time to work on that first round of revisions. Just as a reminder, my book, Daughters of a Dead Empire, is coming out next year, 2021. So as you know, everything in publishing happens on a long timeline. So we're working this summer, we've been working this summer, to revise the manuscript and get it into stronger shape so that it's ready for publication. So what did the edit letter look like? Well, Makisha, my editor, sent me a 6-page letter plus tons of comments as annotations to my manuscript with further suggestions, reactions, and remarks. 6 pages may sound like a lot of changes that somebody is asking for, but it's actually pretty typical and a pretty average number of pages in an edit letter from what I've heard from other debut authors. It wasn't a horror story of like a 20-page edit letter, which I've heard in some cases. She didn't want me to make any massive revisions. She didn't want me to rewrite, half the novel, which sometimes happens. Sometimes editors buy a novel and they love the writing and the concept, but the story itself needs a lot of work. In my case, there were some significant changes that Makisha wanted me to make. And she sent me the edit letter, which was like 6 pages plus the comments, and she gave me a 6-week time frame to make those revisions and get it back to her. So what were the kinds of changes that she was asking for? Well, she wanted me to, for example, change the POV of some of my chapters. So my novel is dual POV, there are 2 protagonists, and she felt that some chapters would hit harder and have more of an emotional impact if they were from the other character's point of view. So I had to play around with that and then also work the surrounding chapters because I do have a very neat alternating chapter by chapter narration structure. So that was one change she asked for. She also asked for things like strengthening the character arcs and the growth progression for some of my major characters, for digging in deeper to some of the ideology and the ideological questions that I'm grappling with, since this book takes place during a revolution when there are, when the structure of the government and of society is really all up in the air. So she wanted me to dig deeper into those themes and into those questions. So what I did when I received her letter was I took a day just to read it, give myself some space to react, just in case I was horrified by anything that was in her letter. And so I took a day, and then we scheduled a phone call where I was able to ask questions about some of the things she was looking for and run some of my own ideas about how to accomplish some of the changes she wanted by her. And of course, when she made suggestions, that would spark something else in me, and so there was a good amount of back and forth in our conversation around the changes I was going to make. Luckily, I really agreed with, I'm gonna say 100% of the changes that she suggested and she requested. I thought all of them were on the mark. They all were going to do a better job of getting at what I was trying to accomplish with this book. That is not always the case, and so I acknowledge how incredibly lucky I am to be working with an editor who doesn't just get the book as it is, but gets what I'm going for. And I think, if you're ever in a situation where you're when your book is up for auction and you have a chance to talk to editors about their vision for the novel, definitely take that into account. It is so valuable. Maybe more valuable than a large advance in some cases, when you have an editor who really understands and aligns with your vision of the novel. After Makisha and I spoke, I took a weekend really to reflect on all of the changes that I was going to make and project how long it was going to take for me to actually make them, because I'm usually pretty good about that sort of predicting how long it's going to take me to write something. So I took a weekend to do all of those calculations, and I ended up asking for an extra week of time, which she was totally fine with doing. She was like, yes, absolutely. take the time you need. So definitely there was room for me to push back a little bit on the timeline. And we landed somewhere that was achievable for me, and I was ultimately able to, hallelujah, get my edits in on time to her. The thing is, I love revising, so I really enjoyed this process. I enjoyed having somebody so knowledgeable to bounce ideas off of and to question some of the storytelling choices that I was making in the novel. So it was a lot of fun actually revising with Makisha guiding me through the process. And I learned a lot in the process too. I learned about the things that drew her to the manuscript, the things that made her fall in love with this story, and the things that she found exciting, which is just so valuable as a writer. So that one just for the appreciation of it, and two, so you know what not to cut, right? So I learned that from her, and I learned really what the experience of working with a professional editor is all about. The level of feedback that Makisha gave me was really high level, and really high level yet focused. So she really drilled in deep and wanted me to dig in deep on character and theme. And so everything that she was asking for was in service of making sure that every element, every story decision was was working towards the purpose of the novel. It was getting at the themes I was trying to bring out, was getting at the full potential of the characters in the story. So that was really incredible to have that experience. And the other thing I learned was, and this has been a big lesson for me over the past year or two, not to cut so much myself. Like I said, I love revising, and I think I get a little too carried away doing it on my own. So when I wrote Daughters of a Dead Empire initially, I spent like 3 years or maybe 2 years revising it before I shared it with anyone. And so that my takeaway now is that I want to share my manuscripts with critique partners at a much earlier stage in the process. And the reason for that is because in revising with Makisha, but also revising with J. Albert Mann, my mentor from Author Mentor Match, was that oftentimes they would ask me for things that I had already written, but I had later cut because I second-guessed myself. I tend to do a lot of that in my revising. I get carried away with new ideas, and the thing about revising a novel is like you could go in 1,000 different directions, and they're all equally valid. But sometimes the spirit of the story, at least for me, since I'm a pantser, the spirit of the story really comes from that first draft and the places that my heart and my mind initially led me to go when I was drafting. And so some of the things that Makisha asked me for, I'd already written, like those ideological conversations between characters that she asked me for. I'd cut a lot of that because I didn't think there was room for it in the manuscript. So I was thrilled to put it back in, and I'm learning now to slow down a little bit and to run my manuscript by someone else to see what resonates with them before I start cutting too much. Revising with Makisha really it brought a level of like seriousness and reality to this entire process. Like, oh, I really am going to be coming out with a book next year, and we're really getting close to what that final draft is going to look like. I'm really happy with the edits that I sent to her. I hope she likes them too. And so it's starting to feel just a lot more real, which is a great feeling. And along those lines, I also saw early sketches of what my cover is going to look like this week. They are incredible, and I cannot wait to share them with you guys. So really about a year and a half out before the book is coming out, things are starting to come together in a really final-ish way. My book, I don't know if I mentioned this previously, my book was pushed back a season, so I'm now coming out fall 2021 instead of spring. So I'm expecting my release date, I don't know yet, but I'm expecting it to be like October 2021. So, long timelines with everything in publishing, but we're really getting close to a final product, and that feels pretty incredible. So that's it for today. That's what revising to my edit letter was like. I'll find out pretty soon what she actually thought of my edits. I'm very eager to hear back from her and to hear what the next step will be, because I don't know if she wants another round of edits or if we're going to move it directly into line edits, which are more refining the prose as opposed to shaping the story. So I will let you guys know what happens next and how it goes, and I will definitely let you know as soon as I have a cover for my book and a release date. So I hope to see you in the next video.